society events, flirting and dancing, and then spending the summer at Dalton Park, telling Elizabeth all about his life in town. As the younger sister of Oliver's best friend, Carver, Elizabeth had not always counted herself as his friend. But as they had grown older, the 5-year span between them had seemed less and less like an impediment to friendship. Now she considered him her very best friend, and they shared all kinds of confidences with one another. But this wasn't about him. This was her season, her chance to show Oliver, herself, that she was no longer the young girl who had chased Oliver, Carver and Mary around the park grounds, begging to be included in their games. Actually, she hadn't been that girl for some time. Elizabeth now had 20 years in her dish, soon to be 21. Really, if anything, she was showing Oliver that she was no longer the schoolroom miss who would listen to him talk for hours on end about whatever love he'd most recently tumbled into. He was always doing that, falling in love. But again, this wasn't about him. As Elizabeth had grown older, she and Oliver had turned into real friends, especially during Carver's dark years after the death of his fiancée, when he refused to return home. Oliver had still come to Dalton Park every summer, however, and he spent those warm, magical months with Elizabeth and her family, but mostly Elizabeth, riding, walking, reading, and doing most all activities that unfortunately didn't include falling in love with her. However, she had come to terms with it. She wasn't one to wallow. Elizabeth hadn't always been this comfortable with the idea that the man she had spent her whole life dreaming about would never reciprocate her affection. No, this was a new resolution, a decree written into her heart and sealed with the wax of her melted hopes and dreams. Elizabeth had decided before she came to London for her first season that she would not waste it wearing the willow for a man who didn't want her back. She deserved someone who cared for her just as much as she cared for him, which was why she was determined to spend her season kicking Oliver Turner out of her heart and finally letting herself shine like a town diamond. Except she didn't feel very shiny at the moment, what with her displaced shoe and her wobbly legs and her voice cracking as if she were an adolescent boy. The sights and sounds and smells of the ballroom were really too much for her. She didn't understand how anyone looked forward to these events. Everywhere Elizabeth turned, someone fluttered a fan, wafting the smell of sweat directly into her face. She pushed around a group of flittering debutantes. Still no exit. She did, however, have a perfect view of Oliver in his beautifully tailored blue jacket, flashing that charming smile of his to a young woman whom Elizabeth didn't actually know, but still managed to hate all the same. Someone should really tell the girl that pink was not her colour. It washed her out. Elizabeth was still seeking an exit when a large feathered coiffure swayed to the music, out of the way enough to give Elizabeth a blessed view of a door. She shuffled across the floor, careful to slide her foot with the ripped slipper instead of fully picking it up. It was just like her to somehow manage to rip a brand new slipper during a ball. It was a subtle, or not so subtle, reminder that even though she was a daughter of the Duke of Dalton, she didn't fit in there with the ton, and she would never get Oliver to see her as the right woman for him. Drat! Not Oliver. Not caring about Oliver's opinion of her was turning out to be a more laborious task than she had anticipated. She pressed on toward the door, not allowing herself